Welcome, my political friends of the interwebs. The legendary YouTuber Sun Country Airline had requested several months ago that I make a video spotlighting my family members that served in the United States Air Force. Any of you who know who Sun Country Airline is know that he is a huge aviation buff, and he loves everything aviation, Air Force, you name it, he loves it. So I thought I'd do this video for him. If you don't know Sun Country Airline, I'll have a link below. Subscribe to him. He's an awesome dude. So anyway, I came to my Hunter family pics on my Facebook. Oh, before I start that, let me tell you, the United States military is well represented. All branches of the United States military is well represented by my family, except for the Coast Guard. Now, I have no clue as to why nobody was ever interested in joining the Coast Guard, although we all respect the Coast Guard immensely. But I have 3 family members that served in the United States Air Force, and so those we will spotlight for Sun Country Airline. Let's see here. And by the way, that doesn't mean that those were the only family members that I have that were flyers, because actually I have a cousin that flew helicopters in the Army. So anyway, first up, I'm just going to take this in order that I have, so not necessarily in order of their enlistment, but Uncle Harvey. Now, Uncle Harvey is a very fascinating guy. Well, was. He's been passed away, I think, since '95. But he is a very interesting guy. He, born and raised in southeast Kentucky, very, very smart. Apparently, he had a photographic memory, and I can't even tell you how much I would kill to have a photographic memory. He also had an affinity for language, or languages, I should say. When he joined the Air Force, during Vietnam, they tested him, and he tested off the charts for intelligence, and they actually sent him to school to learn foreign languages, one of which was Russian. He became fluent in Russian, and that served him through his entire Air Force career. He's highly decorated, probably the most highly decorated, I would say the most highly decorated veteran in my family, but I'm not entirely positive about that. Anyway, his job in the Air Force was really kind of interesting, especially when you consider it was Vietnam and the Cold War. Both when he was stationed in Europe and also when he was stationed in Alaska. But I think the Alaskan story is even more interesting than most. Him and his crew would fly over Soviet airspace. And their job was to monitor Soviet radio traffic, and Uncle Harvey would literally translate and decipher basically what was being said, the chatter on the Soviet airwaves, and then he would report back to his superiors. So that was a really interesting thing to think that he actually penetrated Soviet airspace. Very dangerous. In fact, I couldn't find it, but I have a copy of one of his medals, and it actually gives him a lot of props for how dangerous his job was during a time of war. So Uncle Harvey is a fascinating, interesting guy. Now listen, I got to tell the story about his security clearance, because it is funny, and he even thought it was hilarious. He had a very high security clearance. At one point, he could actually look at his folder. And he used to tell a story, and it was really kind of funny, about how when they first did the initial background checks to get a security clearance. And for those of you who don't know, when you get a military security clearance, they do a thorough background check on you. I mean, thorough. And when he was looking in a folder, they had interviewed a lady who owned a house between his house in Mockingbird Holler and a place called Lone Jack High School. Lone Jack School, because Lone Jack was like 1st grade to 12th, you know. And anyway, on his way to school, he would steal apples out of her tree. He would take a couple of apples. And they were pretty poor, so I don't know if he was just hungry or what, wanted to take something for lunch. I have no idea. But he would take apples during the fall. And in his security clearance, when they interviewed this lady, she said this, and this is a quote: "Any boy that will steal apples will steal anything." You know, and my uncle, of course, it never affected his security clearance, but my Uncle Harvey used to get a kick out of that, and he knew the lady. You know, I mean, it's Mockingbird Holler, or 4 Mile, Kentucky, very very small community. So he knew her, and he was just really surprised and humored that she was that upset about him stealing apples that she thought she'd say that. But anyway, just a really fascinating guy. He passed away in, I believe, '95, and he's truly missed. He was a great American and served his country honorably. So, anyway, Uncle Harvey, first up on the Air Force trip. So, no, let's see here. I'm going to go through to see who the next... Oh, here's one. Uncle Bill actually was in the Air Force before. Now, all three of these guys I'm going to be talking about are brothers, because there's only three that served in the Air Force in my family that I know of. Uncle Bill is a fascinating story. When he was drafted for World War II. Oh, you know, I don't know if he was drafted or if he volunteered. I don't remember. He was a teenager straight out of the holler, right out of Mockingbird Holler in 4 Mile, Kentucky, you know, southeast Kentucky. And it was interesting because when he tells the story much better than me, so I almost wish I could interview him on this. I may do that someday. But he tells the story about how, you know, everybody was tested and they were trying to figure out everybody's aptitudes and all that stuff, and they gave him, offered him a job as a mechanic. And I gotta give him a lot of credit for this, because this is a ballsy move for a teenager, to do this. But what he said was, I didn't come out of 4 Mile, Kentucky to be a mechanic. And now nothing wrong with mechanics, but this is just how he felt. Then they offered him to hear him tell the story. They pushed a manila envelope over to him, or a manila folder. And on the top of the manila folder, it said "Top Secret." And he opened it up, and it was a job classification as a radar technician. Now, radar back then, you have to understand, we're talking, you know, World War II. Radar back then was a military thing. It was a very top secret military stuff. And, you know, I'd say that the vast majority of Americans had never even heard the name radar, ever. So he thought that was intriguing, and I think he liked the fact that it said top secret. It kind of made him feel special. You know, I guess they could have pushed in the manila envelope that said top secret mechanic, and he still would have done it. But they trained him to be a radar technician, and he installed, troubleshot, and maintained radar installations for the military during World War II. And that served him very, very well, because after World War II, the airlines started to come into their own, and he was a big part of installing radar all across the country, and he got paid oodles of money to do it. He was one of the few specialized technicians in the United States that could do that job. And then he at one point became he worked for himself as a private contractor, and he worked with the Canadian Air Force. In fact, lived in Canada for about 35 years and ended up fathering a child with a French-Canadian woman there. And that's why when I've said in the past that I have relatives that are Canadians, I do have relatives that are Canadians. He tells some really interesting stories. He was called back up for Korea and then actually served in Vietnam. But in Vietnam, he was a civilian contractor. And he's got all kinds of really great stories, war stories and stuff like that. And one I can't tell, but he asked me one time. He goes, "You know what we used to call the Vietnamese chicks?" And I'm not even going to go there. Not even going to go there. He's a very interesting character. In fact, he recently became a Kentucky colonel, and he was nominated for his contribution to the advancement of aviation. And I don't know who nominated him, but the governor of Kentucky made him a Kentucky colonel. So he is now Colonel Hunter, the other Colonel Hunter. I was the first Colonel Hunter. He's the second Colonel Hunter. Okay, so let's see here. Oh, you know what? This is not an Air Force thing, but I just wanted to show my grandfather because I've talked about him quite a bit. He was in World War I, and quite a man. I never knew him. He passed away before I was born, but he, quite an individual. Ended up becoming a state representative for his district in Kentucky, in southeast Kentucky. So he worked in the legislature and had some interesting bills that he put forward. Anyway, I don't know what all this stuff is. There's some Freemason stuff there. I do know that I believe he was a Freemason. At least I was told that he was a Freemason. But like I said, he passed away before I was born, so I really don't know. Anyway, if any of you World War II or World War I buffs know what all that stuff is, let me know. Alrighty, let's see here. Okay, Uncle Ed. Ed's kind of a tragic story with the military. But, you know what, let me give you a little better... Let's get a closer look at Uncle Ed. Uncle Ed was a great guy. Uncle Ed taught me how to shoot. He was the first person that ever took me hunting, squirrel hunting. He's just a really awesome guy, and he taught me how to make a cane pole to fish with. Yeah, he's just really fascinating dude. I miss him dearly. He passed away in 1982. He had a job in the Air Force that was, you know, I don't know. Let me start with this. He was drafted in to go to Vietnam, and he was in. He came from Mockingbird Holler. He came from Fort Mount, Kentucky. All the three in the Air Force all came out of that holler, and he, you know, his job that he pulled. At the time, he thought was this awesome. He really did. He thought it was awesome. He actually, one of his jobs was he insulated aircraft. And they used to have the stuff, and he would tell the story that they had these big piles of this real soft insulation. And he laughed and said, we would take naps laying on it. It was so awesome. Well, unfortunately for him, those big piles of insulation that they used to take naps in was asbestos. And Uncle Ed passed away in '82 from melio, whatever the hell they call it, that the cancer you get from asbestos. And it's really tragic. So, yeah, he was killed during Vietnam in the Air Force, and he never even knew it. Didn't know it till '82. It's really, truly sad. The whole thing's sad. But, having said that, I know he was very proud of his service to the country, and he loved seeing the world. He got to see a lot of the world. He went to Europe. I don't, you know, I don't know that he had any regrets. Of course he had regrets that he actually caught cancer, but I think he really enjoyed serving his country, and I think he enjoyed coming from Mockingbird Holler. You know, the interesting thing about Uncle Ed is that of all my grandfather's sons that went away to the military, he's the only one that actually came back. And he ended up spending the rest of his adult life in Harlan County, which is the next county over from Bell County. And yeah, all the rest of my grandfather's children, you know, they left, they took off, and they never came back. You know, once they seen the world, they just couldn't come back to the hills of southeast Kentucky, except for Uncle Ed. Uncle Ed loved being a hillbilly, loved it. He loved the hunting, he loved the fishing, he loved the whole hillbilly lifestyle. He loved it, every bit of it, you know. And he was just a really fascinating guy, and I miss him dearly. He was a really great guy. So anyway, that is the conclusion of my family members that served in the Air Force. And like I said, my family as well. Oh, here's another one of Uncle Harvey that's knocking things over. Yeah, Uncle Harvey. Just a really interesting dude. You know, really interesting guy. Nice guy. Really, really nice guy. So, anyway, yeah, that's all I got for you guys. Like I said, my family's been in every branch of service except for the Coast Guard. And as far back as time. As far back as time. Anyway, everybody take care. And if you have any questions, let me know. See ya!